Here are some tips that every EVE player should know, regardless of if you're a new player, returning player, or you've been around for a while. These things will just make your life a whole lot easier and hopefully allow you to have a little bit more fun in the game. Directional scan, or D-scan, as you've probably heard of it, is one of the best tools in your arsenal for ensuring your survivability and knowing your environment. Now, when I started playing, this was not even easy to find, but on your screen, if you go to your UI and you go to this radar button, down here you'll see a directional scanner. Another important thing to know how to do is manual piloting, and the way this works is by holding down Q, and this will bring up a blue circle with a line. That number is the distance in kilometers that you'll move horizontally, and if you click it once, and then the second click would be a vertical, right? So this means that we'd move up and over in this direction by 6K. This allows you to position into different tight spaces instead of actually having something to approach or to orbit. And also when you're fighting, it allows you to maneuver with a little bit more control. The next tip I'll give you is never autopilot. You should always be manually piloting. And what that means is whenever you click a gate or a structure, hit dock or jump. If you use autopilot, it's going to put you 12 to 15 out from the gate, and you'll have to burn in, which makes you a very easy target for suspecting people who want to tackle you or destroy your ship or whatever the case may be. As it might be tedious, but it's not worth it in the long run. You might as well just sit there and manually click everything so that you can jump immediately, and that'll help with your survivability overall. Bigger ships are not always better. It is very easy as a new player or anybody to just kind of want to rush into bigger ships, but most activities in the game can be done with Tech 1 or Tech 2 battleships, nothing fancy. Knowing the activity you're doing and knowing what's appropriate can also just make your life a whole lot easier. There are situations where more expensive, bigger ships are warranted, but most of the time it doesn't require a lot of bling, and by bling I mean expensive modules or faction variants of ships. So keep that in mind. Bigger, not always better. While skill injectors can be very appealing, they're really only good early on for when you're trying to get into stuff a little bit quicker, but they're expensive, and the more skill points you stack, the longer you play, the amount of skill points you get from them diminishes, and so the fall off in value is very, very steep. So keep that in mind. Try to limit their use and just save your risk for ship replacements or getting into a new class of ship or something like that. Try to diversify your gameplay instead of sticking to one thing like PvP or ratting or mining. Try to spread your activities across multiple different things to kind of keep from getting burnt out. Also, it gives you really good exposure early on and perspective on kind of the game as a whole and how things move around, and knowing how other communities or how other activities work can only make your understanding of them and the other ones that are affected by it even stronger. PvP is just one of those things that you will not be able to avoid as much as you might want to. And even if you're not into PvP, it does add value in the PvE aspect, because conflict will add value and it'll add excitement to what you're doing. And it also helps add value to a lot of the things that you do, especially mining. If there were no conflict via PvP, then most ores and things would have very low prices because there would be no risk associated with going out and doing anything. And knowing that PvP is just part of the game and expecting it and sometimes even wanting it can just help you have a better, more positive attitude and help with the longevity of your enjoyment. Finding a good corporation and a community will almost always be better than any tutorial you go through in EVE. Now, that does not come without its own drama and betrayal. You are dealing in a game that you're going to be involved in interacting with a lot of different people. So there are going to be all of the ups and downs as you expect in any sort of community. So keep that in mind. Now, you will be scammed. Scams are part of the game, whether it be Jita chat is scammers or whether it be suspect baiting or whatever the case may be. The general rule of thumb here is if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. And don't trust anybody. Have doubts and do due diligence and look into anything anyone's trying to tell you, and especially when it comes to accepting or making contracts, make sure you go through it and double check everything, and just make sure that you're just doing everything the correct way that you know how. There are scams in absolutely every corner of this game, and sometimes they're harder to detect, sometimes they're super obvious, but approach it just like you would with anything else. Like I said, if it sounds too good to be true, it most certainly is. Now, high sec, as much as most people would like to think, high sec is not actually safe. It is also, in my opinion, one of the more questionable areas of the game because there are not very clear lines drawn. But it's definitely not as dangerous as like low sec. But don't get it in your head, and don't let anybody let you believe that high sec is the safe place, because really, when it comes down to it, there's no real technical safe place in space. Each of the areas has its own pros and cons, and being educated in the fact that, you know, in high sec, you're going to have a lot of people suicide ganking you. You're going to have a lot of people trying to scam you, a lot of people trying to harass you, and and extort you, and all kinds of stuff going on. The next thing would be to not fly anything or undock anything that you can't afford to lose. This sounds very harsh and kind of brash, but really it helps level your expectations early on to take your time and skill into ships that you're flying to be able to pilot them and survive in them, and, you know, defend yourself adequately. And also, if you take your time while you're playing and progressing through the game, then your revenue streams are going to kind of match the ships that you're going to be flying. If you try to rush using skill injectors to get into that battleship, and you're still waiting on a lot of skills that make that battleship worth it, then chances are you're not going to be at the level to be able to replace it easily. So that's just the golden rule of Eve: is don't undock it unless you're ready to replace it. And that's not meant to scare anybody. That's not meant to intimidate anybody. What that is just to kind of set your expectations at a certain level, and just take your time and just try not to rush. Now, alpha clone status is intentionally going to be limiting, and that is done because it's simply a glorified trial. Now, you can play free indefinitely, but for the most part, this is a game that is a lot of the features, a lot of the playability are behind Omega. And once you get to a certain point where you want more and you want to get more out of it, then it's going to be a subscription-based game for you. But just to let everybody know that doesn't know that alpha, it does exist, but it's very much intentionally supposed to limit you and get you to eventually get into Omega. And it's not necessarily intended for you to just be alpha all the time, although it can be a nice challenge. And lastly, it is a sandbox game. There is no end game in Eve, so a lot of your goals and aspirations in Eve are just kind of defined by you, and your progression and the time you spend in game is kind of centered around what you enjoy and how you want to manage your own time. And since there's no real end game, then you can just go at your own pace and just enjoy things and experiment and do a lot of different things day to day. But at the end of the day, it just comes down to just having fun. As long as you're having fun, I mean, it's a game. As long as you're having fun and you're experiencing and hanging out with cool people and meeting new people, then that's really the point. That's really the purpose. Unlike most games that have a very clear linear path of progression, that doesn't really exist here since it is a sandbox. So just early on, or even if you've been playing for a while, just know that the end game, the goal, the point of the whole thing is really defined by you and what you enjoy. I hope you enjoyed the video, and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.